So now the real fun begins. It's time for us to dig in and start understanding and learning about general psychology. Our first chapter is going to be an introduction as well as a discussion on research methods that's used. So, what is psychology anyway? I'd like for you to take a moment and just think about what psychology means to you at this point. So, to answer the question, what is psychology? We have to think about it in terms of this. Scientific is a key component for the definition of psychology. Psychological science that we collect as well as evaluate information. And what we do is we use systematic observations as well as measurements. First thing and foremost, what are we looking at? Okay, there's a science to psychology, but we specifically look at behavior. Behavior is anything we do that can be directly observed as well as recorded. That can be us laughing, crying, hitting, sleeping. You think of any type of action that you do, and that's what we're doing. Okay? It's also dealing with our mental processes, those private internal experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, our memories that cannot be observed directly. All right, so right now we're going to have our moment. I'd like for you to go through, I'm going to read these out loud, but I'd like for you to think of whether these questions would be true and false. Because you see, psychology, it helps us scientifically to be able to evaluate common beliefs and misconceptions about behavior as well as mental processes. So I want to see if you can identify and see whether or not these questions would be true or false to you. I will read off the question and then I will basically give pause so you can think about your answer and response, and then I'll give you the answer. Okay? So the first one, actions speak louder than words. So what do you think? Well, this answer would be true. Pretty much how we observe and seek things and how we act upon them is allowing us to be able to know whether or not a specific action is being done. So therefore, when we act out our behavior, that's why we would say actions speak louder than words. A person can say something, but they don't necessarily mean they're going to do it, right? So, but if I notice that you're doing a specific behavior, then I know that's what you're doing. You can tell me that right now you are thinking happy thoughts of listening to my voice, but I can't see that. However, if you were to smile at me directly when I ask you that question, then I can actually say that I observed you having pleasant feelings at the response of the question that I answered. So action do speak louder than words. Okay? All right. So now, beauty is only skin deep. What do you think? All right. So this answer actually be false. You know that statement we always say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay? Attractive people, they turn out to have higher self-esteem and considered to be better treated than less attractive people. So, and you see more in like chapter 16. However, it's our own perception of what beauty is. What I might find beautiful, you may not. So beauty can be only, it wouldn't be only skin deep. There's other things that we might consider. Uh, I might be attracted to one's intellect. Okay, I can be attracted to one's sense of humor. So there's a little bit more to us than just our physical characteristics. So then beauty, there might be some beauty on the physical side, but there's other things that would be considered beautiful as well. Cry and you cry alone. Hmm. What do you think? And sometimes I get people to ask the question, well, what do you mean cry and you cry alone? Well, think about it. If you saw me crying on the street, you walking past me and I'm crying, are you necessarily going to cry? So the answer to this question will be true. Cry and you cry alone. Now, there are times and there are moments when you might show some emotion toward another, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to emote the exact same feelings as that individual. You might be empathetic to a person's situation at the time, to which you might feel for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you're going to start boo-hooing because I'm boo-hooing. So this statement is more or less looking at a comparison. And again, it's our perceptions. Whether or not I might be sad or depressed doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be sad and depressed at this as well. Now, I'm going to admit there are times when I watch a movie or I might be watching a documentary in which I'll empathize to the point where I might come to tears. But guess what? That doesn't necessarily mean they're crying at the same time. All right. So now let's run to the next question. Marry in haste, repent at leisure. So another way of saying this, get married quick and then think about it after the fact. Is that true or false? This response would be true. And now, mind you, what I didn't mention to you is that all of these have been research questions. Okay, so these are actually derived from various studies in which these questions were asked and researched upon. So research has demonstrated for this particular response, there's been a prediction that it would be true. Okay, people who marry young or after just a short courtship or dating, they're more likely to seek divorce later on in comparison to those people who, pretty much marry after being together 5, 10, 15 years, or after just, they dated and got to know one another. Uh, those relationships tend to last longer than those who, like 90 Day Fiance, which I don't understand that show personally. I really don't watch it because it really doesn't make sense to me. However, people who tend to get married quickly tend to divorce quickly, and the reason being is you usually don't know one another well enough. And as time goes on, they get married and they realize, wow, I didn't realize this. Oh, I should have thought about this first. Excuse me one moment. I see this red slash. I gotta look at the red slash on my face, and that's my mouse. So let me get rid of that really fast. All right. So anyway, let's keep moving forward. Familiarity breeds contempt. Being familiar with something breeds or makes you feel nauseous. That's another way of saying it. Or sick to your stomach. What do you think? This particular question, the prediction was that it would be false. There's been a series of different studies where people have indicated that their preference for like things of words or symbols, photos that they might have seen frequently. And usually it brings them joy, uh, things that they're familiar with or understand. Think about this. Your favorite foods usually bring some joy rather than make you feel nauseous or sick to your stomach. You're not going to automatically want to go to something that has bad odors. Those type of things. A photo might bring you a great memory. It might remind you of a time that you had an experience in which you had a great time, or we were with family. So when we talk about familiarity, it's those things or those experiences that we're accustomed to and used to. And thus, it's not going to breed contempt, but it's going to give the opposite. It's going to make us feel good. Okay? So now, going to the next question. Do opposite attract? Well, okay. So here's another question that's been researched, and through the different studies that's been performed through investigation, it's been discovered that this statement would be considered false. Now, I know that I'm going to have some people say, well, no, opposites do attract. Here's the thing. A lot of times we might be, if we're talking about relationships, we might initially find someone very different from us highly attractive. But if they get into a relationship, then what happens is usually there's similarities about the individuals, the couple, that actually keeps them together. Okay? So it's research has shown that the proximity or physical attractiveness as well as the similarities are usually the three most important factors when we're talking about interpersonal attractions or relationships. So we'll talk more about this chapter later on down the line, but know that opposites, although they might strike you, they won't keep you. All right, so let's move to number 7. Misery loves company. This is a famous statement for me. It's one of my favorites. Why? Because this one would be deemed true. Many times you'll have friends, and if they see you really happy, you might see that they kind of draw you back and say, well, look, you shouldn't be happy about this, or they'll pull you down in some way. Oftentimes, depressed people are going to be more likely to seek emotional support from persons who are also depressed. They're not going to want to be around someone happy. Right now, I'm feeling bad. I don't want to be around someone bad. Somebody happy. I want to see someone who knows what I'm going through. And so they'll tend to flock toward those who are feeling just as bad as they are at that time. So yes, misery do love company. Here's one that I know if we were meeting in class together, we would get a big response from. Spare the rod, spoil the child. What do you think? True or false? All right. So for many of you, you may be saying, yes, true. If you if you spare that rod, you're definitely going to have a spoiled child. They're going to want and do this. But children who are severely punished when they're young, they're more likely to develop psychological issues when they become an adult uh, than those who are quote unquote spared the rod. There are different techniques besides corporal punishment in order to be able to help reinforce appropriate behaviors and punish those behaviors that is not appropriate. So when we say that question, spare the rod, spoil the child, we have to also look at the fact that there are other techniques that we'll talk about later that would help one change their behavior patterns. All right, so the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay, first and foremost, how many of y'all know what I mean when I say the squeaky wheel gets the grease? Think of it this way. If you are in the process of working at a location and you work hard, what tends to happen when you work hard and your boss notices it? You hopefully will be praised about your job performance and may receive a raise. That's kind of what I'm speaking about when we talk about the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you didn't think of answer, because I know I really didn't give a pause to this because I really wanted to give you the meaning. In this sense, we would say that's true. When management students were asked to decide the salary levels of various job candidates, for example, they kind of awarded higher salaries to those applicants who had requested higher salaries. So those who went after something generally got what they were supposed to get, and those who were too laid back tend not to get much. Okay? So the final one, and then I'm going to end part one of this lecture, is birds of a feather flock together. True or false? This answer would be true. Again, with similarity, this is the single best predictor for long-term relationships, both friendships as well as love relationships. Okay, so you want to be able to see that it's a kind of common sense as well as scientific studies that's been able to do this. You're going to be drawn toward people that has similarities to you. You might be with your friend girls, your boys, and y'all gonna hang out more because y'all have the same or similar interests. If a person doesn't do anything like what you do, you tend not to want to hang with them. So that would mean birds of a feather flock together. So this is the end of part one. When we come back, we're going to continue on with chapter one, the introduction as well as research methods.